Welcome back. On this episode, we're doing a way too early 2024 top 10 for college football. There's nothing like having not full pictures and context about what these teams and what college football is going to look like next season and still trying to predict it anyway. We do have transfer portal. That first window has come and gone. I think we have a general sense of what these teams are going to look like next season. But obviously, there's still a lot of moving pieces and parts, and this ranking could be irrelevant as of tomorrow if some things continue to happen. As of right now, Caleb Downs hasn't even announced where he's going to commit for next season. So there's still some balls up in the air and some things that could change, but we're going to get this out, and we're going to have it, and maybe we can come back to it in a few months and laugh and say, oh, how little Josh knew. We're going to go from 10 to 1. So kicking things off at number 10, I've got Penn State. Penn State has the talent and the requisite pieces needed in order to compete. They just need to put together game plans that will allow them to do so. So they bring in two new coordinators on the defensive side. Manny Diaz goes to be the head coach at Duke. They replace him with former Indiana coach Tom Allen. And then on the offensive side, things they weren't good, frankly, on offense last year. You've got all these players, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Drew Aller, and it just wasn't working. I think they averaged something like 215 yards per game passing. They bring in former Kansas offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki in order to fix that offense and hopefully get the ball rolling there. And I think they've got the pieces to do it. They also add Julian Fleming in the transfer portal from Ohio State. He's a former number 1 overall recruit, number 1 wide receiver recruit. I think they've got the pieces. Obviously, you've still got to play Ohio State. You've still got to play Michigan. Can they win these tough games that they haven't been able to win under James Franklin? If that offense takes a step forward and they're able to score touchdowns and they're able to put up points, Penn State at 10 will look foolish because they're going to be really, really good. The defense is going to be really good. They're bringing back all kinds of pieces, and they develop defensive players extremely well up there at Penn State. Number 9, I'm going Utah. Let's imagine a world where everybody doesn't get hurt last year, where they're not having to play 3 different quarterbacks, a bunch of running backs. 2023 for Utah was a lost season. They just didn't have their players. But Cam Rising is back. I think through those injuries, they found some players for them that can be really good that probably wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to play had all these guys not gotten hurt. One of them might be, I know we talk about Travis Hunter as being the best two-way player in college football. Sione Vaki for Utah might be legitimately the best two-way player in college football. I'm going to read some of these stats off to you, and you're going to be like, why did I not know this guy's name before watching this video? Just take a listen to this. He's listed as a safety for Utah. He had 50 tackles and an interception last year as a safety, but he also had 500 total yards rushing and receiving and 5 touchdowns as a running back / receiver. He averaged 7.5 yards per carry. He had 158 yards rushing last year against Cal. He had 150 receiving against USC. This is a safety that just got some snaps at running back. I think he had 40 carries last season at 300 yards, 7.5 a clip. He might be their best offensive player. Sione Vaki, the safety, might be Utah's best offensive player. He's a freak. You wouldn't have known his name had they not lost everybody to injury last year. That's the kind of players that they've got on this team. And Sione Vaki was way, way down the list of Utah's best players. They're also going into the Big 12, which means a really manageable schedule for next season. Their toughest opponents, in my mind, are Colorado, Arizona, and TCU. Arizona would have been in this top 10 list had Jedd Fisch not left and thrown all of that into flux. I don't even know if Noah Fafita or Teodoro McMillan are going to stay at Arizona. They might go to Washington. They might go somewhere else. They might stay. I don't know. Arizona is a complete coin flip right now for how good they're going to be. Colorado as well, kind of a coin flip. I want to think that they're going to be a pretty good team next year, but don't really know. TCU, same thing. Don't really know. Utah feels like a team that will be overlooked that could win every single game they play next year. Would not be surprised in the least if they win 11 or 12 games just due to their schedule, to the talent coming back. Getting Cam Rising healthy and back is a massive, massive deal for this Utah team, and they could be very, very good next season. I've got them at 9. At number 8, I'm going Missouri. Maybe it's a bit of recency bias. I don't know. But, man, they looked really good, and they beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl 14-3. The ball is rolling in the right direction for Missouri, and they're returning their starting quarterback, Brady Cook, and also their best receiver, Luther Barden. They added Toriano Pride, corner from Clemson, and Williams Nwaneri, who was the number 1 pass rusher in this past recruiting class. They've got to replace the running back Schrader, who had 1,400-something yards. He was really good, but I think they can do that. I think what that team was they were centered around Brady Cook and Luther Barden. So I think they're going to be just fine. They've added some pieces on defense. I would keep an eye on their 2 corners. I think they're losing both of their corners, and they got to replace those guys. But they've been really active in the portal, and I think Eli Drinkwitz has Missouri on the uptick. This is not a program that we should look at as now a 10 wins per year kind of program. But when you have a veteran quarterback, which put a pin in that, don't forget the value of veteran quarterbacks in college football. When you've got a veteran quarterback, when you have a stud receiver who could be a first-round pick next year, that's incredibly valuable in modern college football, especially when you've got a lot of these teams at the top that have question marks at quarterback going into next season. You know, they might have some talent on paper, but we just don't know how it's going to translate onto the field. So Missouri comes in at number 8 for me. At 7, I'm going Notre Dame. They're replacing their offensive coordinator who went to be a head coach. They grabbed Mike Denbrock, who was the offensive coordinator at LSU. Does that ring any bells, perhaps? Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy under this guy. They put up a crap load of yards and touchdowns last season at LSU. He comes up to Notre Dame. You also add Riley Leonard at quarterback and Bo Collins, wide receiver from Clemson, in the portal. The offense should be pretty solid under Denbrock. I would imagine they're going to introduce more motion, more quick game in the offense, and take advantage of Riley Leonard's legs as well. I think the one question for me, and this will sort of limit how far Notre Dame can go next season, is what does their offensive line look like? You're replacing a few starters there on offensive line. Obviously, Joe Alt is gone to the draft. So how did they look? I guess where I default to with Notre Dame is they have been the best program for developing offensive linemen in college football the past, 5-10 years. So if I'm going to trust that a school is going to get their offensive line in order, I think we can trust that Notre Dame is going to have at least a decent to very good offensive line next season. They seem to have a great offensive line every single year. So I'm going to default to, I think they're going to be okay on the offensive line. Okay, future me jumping in here. As I was editing, I realized I didn't have Michigan anywhere in my top 10, which I do think they're going to have a down year compared to what they have been, because I think Jim Harbaugh's gone, and I think J.J. McCarthy, J.J. McCarthy is gone, Blake Corum's gone, the entire offensive line is gone. But they did just win the national championship. So if they were not in the top 10, that was going to be a little weird. I've got them at 7, so that now makes it to where Penn State gets bumped out. They're number 11. So then I have Utah. What is it? Utah, Missouri, Notre Dame, Michigan. Yeah, Utah, Missouri, Notre Dame, Michigan, and then the top 6 is the same. At number 6, and this one could make me look stupid in a lot of different ways. At number 6, I've got Alabama. Obviously, Nick Saban retiring threw this whole deal into flux. They do bring in Kalen DeBoer, who I think is going to end up being a really good coach for them. And I think he has been really good wherever he goes. Obviously, we've all heard about the 104-12 and all the winning that he has done at Washington and everywhere else that he's been. But they do lose a lot of talent to the portal. Caleb Downs entered the portal. Isaiah Bond committed to Texas. That's not great. And losing Caleb Downs is a big deal. He's their best player, bar none. And to lose him hurts a lot. And you also got to look at what's the staff end up looking like. It does seem like Ryan Grubb is going to be the offensive coordinator for Alabama, which is really interesting because that whole marriage between DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, and Jalen Milroe, that remains to be seen. I have no clue what that's going to look like. They are a sit back and pass sort of offense. At least they have been with Michael Penix and Ryan Grubb. So Jalen Milroe doesn't quite fit that archetype. He's a dude, don't get me wrong, but he's not the kind of quarterback that just sits in the pocket and destroys you from the pocket. He's a guy that utilizes his legs, and his legs might be his best asset as a quarterback. And that can work in college football, but will it work in this offense specifically? I don't know, and it remains to be seen. I think it's very possible by the time this video's out, Jalen Milroe has entered the portal and decided to go play somewhere else. I have no clue. Maybe he stays. Maybe it works. Maybe he goes somewhere else, and maybe he stays and it doesn't work. There's a lot of different ways this offense could look next year, and I'm not really sure what it's going to look like. As far as their schedule, they've got Wisconsin, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, and Tennessee on the schedule. There could be anywhere from 1 loss to 4 losses on this schedule next season. I don't really know. I will say this. Kalen DeBoer has won a lot of games, especially was at Washington, with the second best team on the field. So I do have belief in Kalen DeBoer as a guy on the sidelines to get his team in situations that are advantageous. But again, Alabama at 6 could be too low or too high, depending on what this roster ends up looking like come next season. At number 5, and maybe it's just a result of the flux that Alabama's in right now, but number 5, I've got Ole Miss. They have been super active in the portal. And the 2 pillars that I place this ranking of 5 for Ole Miss, it's on the portal, but also the other pillar is the fact that they have a veteran quarterback. Pull that pin out, bring that thought back to the fore in your mind again. The value of veteran quarterbacks, in Ole Miss's case, Jackson Dart, is incredible, and you can't really overlook it when you're going to look at these games where it's sort of a coin flip and you're not sure how it's going to go. You default to, well, who's got the better quarterback? Who's going to make the most plays on offense? Their schedule, too, isn't super difficult. You do have LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia on that schedule. But I think with this roster, they could win 2 of those 3, maybe in a perfect world 3 of those 3. You do add Walter Nolan and Juice Wells in the portal. That's going to help a ton, especially Walter Nolan. Like, former number 1 overall recruit, was the number 1 player in the portal. He's a freak. Juice Wells is awesome as well. No pun intended. The only question mark here, and the thing that really hurts, is losing, in my mind, Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State in the portal. That one's tough because I think he was their most dynamic offensive player. But they do have Lane Kiffin at coach. And if I believe one thing about Lane Kiffin, it's that he's going to have a dynamic offense, especially when paired with Jackson Dart at quarterback. So Ole Miss comes at 5 for me. At number 4, I'm going Ohio State. Feels like they're bringing back all of their playmakers except Marvin Harrison Jr., doesn't it? Everybody's coming back. So you do add Will Howard at quarterback in place of Kyle McCord. You also add Jeremiah Smith, number 1 receiver in their recruiting class. You get that, and you add that to a top 5 defense, which is what Ohio State had last season. And they should be really, really good. They brought in Bill O'Brien to be the offensive coordinator because it looks like Ryan Day wants to be in more of a CEO type role instead of the offensive whiz kid sort of role. I think he's going to hand off play calling to Bill O'Brien. Keep in mind, Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator for Alabama when they won their last national championship. So he's going to be just fine. Their schedule right now has Iowa, Michigan, Oregon, and Penn State on it as the premier teams that they're going to have to deal with. Michigan, I have massive questions about what Michigan's going to be next season. Oregon, really good. And Penn State, obviously, is going to be tough as well. But Ohio State could win all of these games next season and go 12-0, especially with who they've got returning. If Will Howard pans out at quarterback, they're going to be a really, really good football team next season. And number 3, going Texas. They benefit massively from the Quinn Ewers return at quarterback. They also added Isaiah Bond in the wake of Nick Saban's retirement from Alabama. That's going to help a ton because they were losing Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy to the draft. So they've got to replace their top 3 pass catchers, which also included tight end Jatavian Sanders. Adding Isaiah Bond is going to help and go a long way with that. You obviously still have C.J. Baxter at running back, who was just a freak last season. They do return 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen from a year ago. So I think this is going to be a team that's going to lean into the run game, lean into the lines of scrimmage, which is where they were noticeably better a year ago. And why they made the run to the playoff was that they were just better on the lines of scrimmage than just about everybody they faced. Keep in mind, this is a team that went into Bryant-Denny Stadium last year and pushed Alabama around for 4 quarters. And when it mattered most, when they had to have it, they just leaned on them. They just leaned on them with the run game, with that offensive line. And that run game and that line is going to be back for 2024. Adding Quinn Ewers to the mix should help quite a lot. And, coming into the SEC, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a difficult first year, but I think Texas has been built to deal with the SEC because Steve Sarkisian has recruited those lines of scrimmage incredibly well. Texas is going to be great next season. Number 2, perhaps a bit of a surprise, but I've got Oregon. I think Oregon is just going to be incredible, and I'm really a big fan of what Dan Lanning has done over the past 2 years. He's 21-5 in his 2 seasons at Oregon, and part of the mix here is that they add Dillon Gabriel at quarterback in the transfer portal, who put up just ridiculous numbers at Oklahoma a season ago. It feels a lot like what they had in Bo Nix, where Bo Nix was able to sit back and just pick defenses apart. He was incredibly accurate and processed the field well. Dillon Gabriel does a lot of those same things, and Dillon Gabriel's going to Oregon to basically boost his draft stock. That's the whole goal here for Dillon Gabriel. You also had Evan Stewart out of the transfer portal, former number one wide receiver recruit from Texas A&M. He was the number 2 player in the portal, believe it or not. They also have the number 3 2024 recruiting class as well coming in. So Oregon is doing a lot of good things in recruiting in the portal, reloading from this team that was just 2 games away from the college football playoff. I have some questions about the fact that they did lose to Washington twice. That's a little suspect. They lose by a field goal 2 times to Washington. And I think if you were to go just position by position and look on paper, Oregon had the better roster than Washington in both of those games and still lost. But outside of those 2 games where they lost by a field goal, their average margin of victory in their 12 wins was 32 points. They just boat raced everybody except Washington on their schedule. And remember, the Pac-12 was just a murderer's row last season with Oregon State, with USC, Washington, Utah, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on. Oregon crushed everybody except Washington. So they're really good. They're going to be really good again. They're at number 2 for me, which leaves us with Georgia. I don't need to say a ton about Georgia other than they're 42-2 in their last 3 seasons, which is just ridiculous. They return their quarterback, and they add another number 1 recruiting class to the mix. They should be really good. They should pick up right where they left off. They had Trevor Etienne at running back in the portal. It's going to offset the fact that they're losing Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, but they just keep reloading. Every year they keep reloading. Kirby Smart has this program on autopilot. They're going to be really good next season, and if I were a betting man, I'd be betting on Georgia to win it all next season. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video as well. I'll see you in the next one.